Hi everybody, it's Susan from Sunrise Quilt Studio and welcome to week 28 of the Stash Buster block series. Our block this week is called Stardust. It's made with 3 different colors. It's got squares and half square triangles in it, and it forms a 4-pointed star. And I think this is an interesting block, and I hope you'll stay with me and I'll show you how to make this one. Here are the pieces that you're going to need to make the Stardust block. You're going to need background fabric, and then you'll need 2 contrasting fabrics, and I've chose a blue and a purple. For your background, you're going to need 4 pieces that are 2 7/8 inch square and 4 pieces that are 2 1/2 inch square. Then for your star points, you'll need 4 pieces that are 2 7/8 inch square. And then for the purple squares on the outer of the block, you need 4 that are 2 1/2 inches square. And the first thing we're going to do is make the half square triangles, which will form the star points. And to do that, we'll take the background 2 7/8 inch squares, and we're going to draw a diagonal line from corner to corner with a pen or a pencil. And that's going to be our guideline for stitching, and we're going to match these squares up with the star point fabric, which for me is blue, and we're going to lay them right sides together and then stitch 1/4 inch away on both sides of this drawn line. So let's go to the sewing machine and do that. So I have my 1/4 inch piecing foot on, and I'm just going to run the edge of that foot right along the edge of the drawn line. And then I'll take another set of my squares and do the same thing. I'll piece these all. I will chain piece all of these together. So just line up the raw edges and use that drawn line as a guideline. Okay, I have one more set here. And okay, just flip those around and give myself a little slack so I can maneuver this the way I need to, and then just finish these up. Okay, now I'm going to cut these apart, and then I'm going to cut right on the line that I drew. And I'm just going to get my fabric cutting scissors and just cut right along there. Now you can use your rotary cutter if you want to, whichever works best for you. I have my scissors handy, and I'm just going to do it this way. So we'll have our half square triangles here. Okay, now let's do some pressing. Now I'm going to press all of these towards the dark fabric. So I'm just going to lay them all up with the dark fabric up, and then just press. Now the edge that we have cut, this here, the long edge, is the bias edge. So that should be fairly stable because it is on the inside, and it is. It is stitched together to the white fabric. So, but you still want to be careful because you can still distort those. So if you want to use steam, you can use steam, though it isn't necessary. Okay, now the next thing to do is to trim off all the little dog ears, because those will just create bulk, which will cause lumps in your block, and you may have a little bit more difficulty putting it together if you leave those on there. So I always trim them off. I know a lot of quilters don't, and you may not see any problem with that until you get to the point of quilting. Now if you are sending your quilt out to a long arm quilter, they will appreciate your effort to trim those off, because it will make it a little more difficult for them to quilt over those lumpy areas in your quilt. So if you can trim off all the extra dog ears, it really does help. Okay, what we're going to do next is we're going to form some units, and this block is actually just has just one unit in it, just repeated and turned. So this corner here with these pieces in it is the same as this one, it's just rotated. So we're going to do this, and we're going to start with the white corner, and then we need a purple next to it, and I'm using batiks. Okay, we need a half square triangle that is facing this direction, and then we need one that goes this direction to form the diamond. So we want to make 4 of these units, and then when we put the units together to make the block, we'll just be rotating them. So I'm going to lay the right sides together, and I want to stitch through here, and then we'll bring it back over here and press, and then we'll sew the 2 rows together. Okay, here's the first 2 pieces of that unit. And then here are the second 2 pieces. These are the 2 half square triangles, and they should be forming an X going in opposite directions. The seams, well, we've got this seam is going this direction, the one on the back is going that direction. So if you can see that, they're kind of going in opposite directions. So that way you know you've got them in the right orientation. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and sew the rest of these. Okay, I'm wanting to streamline my sewing, so what I'm going to do is to lay all of the pieces out the way I want to sew them, and just stack them on top of each other. So here are all my white fabrics, here are all my purple, and I have half of the half square triangles here and the other half right next to them, just making sure that they are forming a diamond shape. So now when I go to the machine, I'm just going to take these and just sew all of these together, and then all of these together, and just chain piece them. That'll just save me some time. These are the top 2 pieces of my unit, or my pieces for the top row, I guess I should say. And we'll just chain all of these together. Okay, and then here are the pieces for the bottom sections. These are half square triangles. Okay, now I'm going to cut all of these apart and then press them. All right, here are all the solid pieces, and then here are all the pieces, if that makes sense. These are all the white and purples. These are all the star point, the half square triangles. So I want to press all of these towards the dark. Okay, and then we'll press all of these. Now on these, on this block here, I've pressed the units, the seams of the units open for the most part. This one I didn't, but here on this one they're all open, but these are all pressed to one side. And what I was doing is trying to avoid a lot of bulk here in this point. So we'll get to that point when we get the whole block put together. But right now I just need to press to one side. And these units, since this piece is, it's going to go lay like this, which it looks odd right now, but it'll go together. This seam is pressed towards the dark, so I want to press this seam towards this unit here. So we're going to press it flat and then press it open, or to the side, not open, like that. So I'm going to do that with all of these pieces. Make sure I've got them going the right direction. And I have to remember to be very careful with this iron. Those scars on my wrist, that's because I swiped it right up the side of the iron at one point. And it happens so fast. So just be careful, especially like me, the iron is down below my waistline, and it's easy to hit that iron before you even realize it's happening. Okay, so now these units are going to go together like this. So I'm going to sew this row to this row. And my seams should be nesting, which means they're going in opposite directions, like that. So I'm going to go to the sewing machine and sew all of these units together. Well, my next door neighbor has decided to mow his lawn. I thought I had found a quiet time of the day, but evidently it's not. So we'll see how this works. But we're just going to sew these two units together. Same with this one. And I'm just going to chain piece them all together. And I'm going to turn this one, what I forgot about was the points. So I want to watch where my stitch lines cross here, and I want to stitch right to the right side of that stitching, so that I don't cut off my point. We'll cut all these apart, and that one looks good. That one may need to be redone. That one looks good. Looks all right. Okay, let's go press these open now. Okay, Okay, since the mower noise is so loud, I'm going to voice over this part of the video. Now I'm getting ready to press these units, and I'm going to press everything towards the two solid squares instead of the half square triangles. Now this is just a beginning point, because once we get these units laid out and start sewing them together, there may be some changes that I have to make in the way the seams are pressed, just to get all of these seams nested together, because if they are laying one seam on top of the other, it's a little bit harder to control how they match up. So I'm just going to press them all towards one side, all towards the same side, and see where we go from there. Now for the layout, here's one of the units, and I'm just stacking them all up in the same direction and lay the first unit out, and then take the next unit and just rotate it, and then I'll do the same for each one. Just lay them out the way the one is before it, and then rotate it so that I create the complete block. And now I need to sew these units into rows and then sew the rows together, and this is where I'm going to have to work to match up all the seams. So I'm going to match the seams up for these two units I'm going to sew together, and as you can see here, those seams are pressed in the same direction, so they're stacked right on top of each other, and that's going to cause them to want to shift as I'm sewing them. Now since that one seam is already kind of tacked down, the seam on the other piece isn't, so I can flip that one and repress it towards the other direction, so that will help me nest those two seams together. So I'm just using the steam on my iron, giving it a good press, and then those seams should match up. So I'm going to compare those two and make sure the seams are going in opposite directions, and then those can be sewn together. But I also want to check all the other seams that are going to meet up. And here on this block, and once again, they are pressed in the same direction, so I'm going to take one of the blocks and repress the seam so that it's going in the opposite direction. And then where those two seams meet up, they should nest together pretty well. So I've got that one set, and now I need to compare the next two pieces, and I need to compare the seams on the top and on that left side and see where they all meet. And so I'm going to repress to get them to nest the way I want them to, and lay it in place and double check everything, and then I need to repress the seam in the block next to it so that those two seams will also nest together. So I'm going to lay them back in position, and I'm just double checking the way all the seams are laying, and now I can go to the sewing machine and sew these units together. And just going to repress a few things to get everything looking nice and smooth, just so I have a nicer finished look to the block. And a lot of times when you press, things do want to kind of flip the opposite direction on you, so just keep pressing until you get everything looking the way you want. Okay, now I have all the units sewn together in rows. So I have two rows here, and next thing I want to do is I want to press these seams open. Now this isn't something that I routinely do when I'm piecing blocks, but there are a lot of seams coming together in the center of this block, and so I want that to be as flat as possible. So I finger press that seam open first, and then I'm pressing it with my iron and a little bit of steam to get that to lie flat. And now I'll do the same thing with the next row of the two units, and just finger press it and press it flat. Now this also gives me a good visual where all those points come together so that I can line those up when I'm sewing the two rows together, so that I get a nice point right there in the center. So I'm just going to flip these over and double check, make sure everything looks good, and then I'm going to put them all together and then sew along that seam. And then I also need to match the seams. Okay, now I need to match the points, and I'm going to start with the point in the very center, And I'm placing a pin in through the back of the top unit, right through the point, where you can see here that I'm showing the pin coming right through the point where all of those triangles come together, and then doing the same thing to the right side of the unit that's underneath it. So I want to get that pin all lined up so that it is perpendicular to the edge of the seam, and then I'm going to pin that in place. And then I need to match the seams up on the rest of the row. So there's a total of 3 seams to match up here. And now I'm ready to stitch that with my 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I'm taking my time here because I want to make sure everything stays stable, it doesn't shift on me, and I can get everything stitched down well. Now when I get to this point where all the triangles are meeting, I am checking to make sure that I stitch just to the right side of where all of those points come together. I don't want to stitch right through the point, and I don't want to stitch to the left side of it. I want to go to the right side, which is the side where the seam allowance is. And that way it won't cut off any of the points in the triangles, and it won't leave too much space also. So that's another thing you don't want, is a lot of background fabric there. So let's see what that looks like when I pull that out from underneath the machine. Just going to clip my threads, and here we have the points where they all meet together. And there you go. So now that I'm happy with my points, now I need to press that seam. And I'm going to press the seam open like I did between the units in the rows. So I'm just going to kind of ease that open with my fingers, and then just carefully run the tip of my iron along that seam to get it pressed open. And you can use steam if that helps. Just be very careful with your fingers, and don't burn yourself on that. But let's flip it over and see how that looks. Just giving it a little extra press to get all of those seams pressed the way I want them, getting them nice and flat. And you could also use a little steam, that also helps. So just keep pressing until your block is the way you like it. Okay, let's flip it over, and there we have the completed block. As usual, I have 4 of the blocks made up, and I wanted to show you what they look like when you put them all together. And I have them here, they're all side by side, and they're all facing the same direction, and this is the look that you can get. Now there's really not a whole lot of anything else that you can do. It doesn't matter how you turn these blocks, it looks the same, because this is just one unit that's just rotated around, and your corners are going to be the same. Each side is the same, so it really doesn't matter how you turn them. You get the same look. So if you want to put them side to side without any sashing in between, this is the look you'll get. Now you'll have a little 4-patch here where you could put some special quilting in if you wanted to. But you can also change this up if you want. You can change the colors of the corners in your block, and you know, use another contrasting color, and maybe just do 2 opposite corners like these 2 here, and that would give you a different look when you rotate the blocks. So I think this is a really pretty block if you use some of your favorite colors in it, and it's got enough motion in it, I think, and that you really don't need a whole lot of anything else in there. So I hope you give this block a try. I hope you enjoyed this video on the Stardust block. I think it makes a real pretty quilt, and I hope you'll give this one a try. And if you like this video, I hope you will click the like button, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and don't forget to click that notification bell so you'll be notified when the next video comes up. And in the meantime, I hope you're all staying safe and staying healthy, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. For more quilting ideas, click on the video links, and to keep up with my latest projects, click on the subscribe button. I hope to see you again soon.